Hi, and welcome to Faculty Focus, a podcast supporting the clinical education community in Leicester. We bring you Educator CPD, showcase new initiatives, and shine a light on some of the faculty behind it all.
Today, I'm joined by my colleagues to discuss the emergence of AI in medical education and how we can begin to use some of the tools available in our teaching. There are certainly some big time benefits for our educators. However, there are pitfalls and caveats worth knowing about. As ever, a good understanding of learning theory will help guard against inappropriate use. It's certainly a fascinating topic and one which we will return to in the future to see how AI in medical education plays out. We hope to spark your interest and maybe tempt you to experiment with some of the tools out there. Please see the show notes for links to some of them. My colleagues are Hussein, who you'll know from previous podcasts, Max Brayshaw-Williams, who is our resident learning technologist within the Department of Education, and Kash Makam, a consultant anaesthetist here in Leicester, and also the Final FRCA teaching lead for the region.
How's everyone doing?
Good, thanks. Yeah, just getting settled back into work after a bit of time off. It's always the struggle, isn't it? So,
Where'd you get to?
so just been up to, we did Devon in Appledore in Devon. Sorry, makes more sense. This was a week and a half ago now, and I'm still not settled into work. But yeah, and then it's just been busy weekend. So yeah, no time for breaks.
Summer holidays, isn't it? Not much for a holiday. How about you, Hussein? You've been up to much?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm just lamenting the lack of summer. We've just been drowned out.
In your windowless lab?
This one has a window, but there's a heat wave gripping Europe, but I've not seen the sun in a couple of weeks.
I just got back from a week on the Isle of Wight, which was very nice, but very tiring with two kids. So I come back to work for a bit of a break. Sad state of affairs.
I feel sorry for you, but it was your choice to have children. So
Yeah. Was it then?
You're free to make mistakes in your life.
I completely sympathise.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for joining me today. We've also got Kash Makam, who is running a bit late, so he might join us a little bit later. So today's podcast is really going to be looking at artificial intelligence in medical education. It'd be very hard not to have come across the stories of ChatGPT that was released tail end of last year now, November time, 2022. And I think that's probably when AI sort of burst onto the scene and everyone started to take notice of it because it was a publicly available version for people to play around with and have some fun with. And actually, it's been updated since then, which I didn't realize until this morning. So there's a newer version of ChatGPT that's just been launched. I think I think you have to pay for it. But anyway, I think since then there's been a regular trickle of AI stories in the media, and of course all the different tools using AI out there, not just language models, but videos and photos and all sorts. So it's very much still in its infancy. I think in everyone's consciousness, it's still quite a new thing. That said, there's already courses that are out there that can tell you how to use it and pay to go on courses, and people tell you about how to use AI in business or in teaching. So I thought it was one of those things that's probably good to look at, certainly from the perspective of medical education. And I think what's probably happening is people are playing around and using AI as educators and just trying to see whether there's a place for it. So what we're going to do is really just talk about it. Disclaimer to any listeners, none of us are particular experts in AI. We're all just on this kind of journey of exploration and trying to figure out what works. So yeah, we're not going to give you any sort of categoricals, cast iron guarantees on how you should use it. But I think it's worth just talking about some of the challenges, some of the pitfalls, potential benefits, and also what's out there that might be useful to start playing with. I just thought I'd clarify that the podcast is really going to be about AI that educators can use to help teach or, assist in learning, rather than AI use in clinical medicine, because I think AI obviously can be used in lots of different contexts, but this is really a case of using AI, how educators might start to use AI in enhancing their offering as educators. So what I thought it would be interesting to start with is see where everyone's up to in their AI journey and how much they've explored, experimented? What have you come across? What have you found that it can do for you? Where should we go? Should we start with Max and then Kash and Hussein?
So I kind of touched base with AI in kind of several different formats, I think, so far. Again, kind of casting like a really wide net and doing really kind of preliminary tests, nothing kind of too deep, just to kind of see what you can get out of it. So we've messed around with kind of image stuff like that, so generating imagery. And for anyone that's tried that, it's not that accurate at the moment. It can be really hit and miss. We've had fantastic results one day and then absolutely atrocious results the next. We've also done stuff with like video editing, because part of my role is creating content and videos and educational videos and stuff like that. Again, kind of hit and miss. Create some really good videos some days, but there always seems to be that same sort of formula. So it seems to be pulling from almost the same kind of crop every time. And we get the similar sort of thing, just a different voiceover. But again, early days for some of this. And then, yeah, to stuff like audio, so Murph AI, generating audio based on scripts and stuff like that. So kind of text to speech, but a bit more realistic. Yeah, and then you chat GPT, so just kind of putting prompts and stuff in there to get some information back, whether that's how to plan a lesson, some step-by-step guides, creating scripts as well, in conjunction with stuff like Murph AI and things like that for whatever content people need. Yeah, that's kind of my experience so far.
So you've covered it really from really in a professional capacity in your role in the Department of Education. That's where you've mostly been using it then.
Yeah, pretty much. With kind of how quickly it's expanded in kind of the last half a year almost, especially when it goes to public domain, like, and everyone gets their hands on it, it kind of rapidly changes the moment that happens. And it's just making sure we're on that bandwagon, so we're not going to start lagging behind. So it's kind of good to know like how all these things are working and where they're going, because at the end of the day, they are a thing now. It's not something that's going to go away. So it's how can we leverage that to make our everyday easier, maybe reduce some of the mundane tasks we have and kind of free ourselves up some more of those human activities, I think.
Thanks, Max. Kash, have you been using AI, or how have you found it?
So so sort of similar lines to what Max has said. So I use it mostly in my role as organising exam teaching for the region for anaesthetics in the East Midlands. And I found it quite useful in terms of it takes a lot of the tediousness out of it. So, for example, writing practice exam questions. So what I've previously done is grab a BJ education article, for example, chuck that into Bard and say, give me format of questioning, and it will spit out the question. And, it's not perfect by any means of the imagination, but it's probably taken 90% of the work out of it for me. Spend another 10 minutes and probably cut down my workload by 75% just in that one particular task, for example. And then it's also really good in terms of like a creative way of, if I'm struggling to explain something to someone, again, I can just put that concept into either ChatGPT or Bard. Those are the two I tend to use the most often, and say, dumb this down for me, or explain it like a five-year-old is quite a good prompt. And you tend to get a reasonable way back of explaining it in a way that you probably might not have thought before. So that's sort of the main use that I've come across in my use of it so far.
That sounds brilliant, actually, to save that much time, to cut those sort of tasks down. That's a phenomenal improvement in efficiency. It's just the first draft, isn't it? And you can then tweak it. That sounds really interesting. Hussein, have you experimented very much?
Limited. Beyond typing in stupid questions and seeing what it comes up. Histology is a really interesting medium to kind of plug into AI, because you've got that continuous source, and just plugging in pictures can really help develop an algorithm, particularly if it's annotated. So I think it's got scope there, but perhaps similar to some of the themes that have come up and that we'll talk about, it's very hit and miss. It's good at identifying some things and not others. It's an adjunct, pretty sort of simple adjunct at the minute, but it quickly comes a cropper, I think, in my use.
I think the first time I heard about it and created my OpenAI account for ChatGPT, I decided to write a story And I got it to write a story for my kids, a bedtime story, using their names, knights and dragons and all the rest of it. And it just churned out a, 400-word short story, and they loved it. And it has all those it probably had about 3 false endings, but it sort of churned out like the moral of the story sort of stuff at the end, where it's sort of, and everyone got on very well, and so they realized that it was really important to accept others for who they are and all this kind of stuff. So I'm quite impressed. And then I used it to write a complaint letter, and I'm pretty sure I got an AI generated response to my AI complaint letter. So maybe that's a potential insight into the world we're going to be living in. But no, I haven't really used it in a medical context for sort of formal teaching as yet. It's just playing around with it. But I have seen from playing with some of the stuff that's out there that there is real scope there to make video creation and instructional videos much quicker and easier. And I think that's something that Max has been working on in the department. So maybe we'll probably put a lot of links into the show notes for the podcast so that people can then go off and explore some of these tools. But maybe, we can talk about some of the strengths and pitfalls of maybe when we go through some of those tools. So Max, do you want to sort of pick one out that you think is particularly useful that you've used? Just tell us a little bit more about it and maybe some of the difficulties too.
So I think one of the biggest ones I've used at the moment is Beyond Go for video production, or Murph AI for voice. I'll probably go down the Murph AI route because I think voice one's always an interesting one to look at anyway. So yeah, Murph AI is fantastic. What it does, it's really, really good. We've used it for voiceovers for some instructional videos involving kind of how certain things work in the department. And it's really handy because at a time we were recording audio for someone. So if someone was coming in, they were doing the voiceover, they're talking through it. But the moment a procedure changes, that person needs to then be brought back in, re-record. And with the nature, again, I'm still finding my feet within the NHS with the nature of that. There's rotations, people leave within 3 months, 6 months, a year. So we'd have these videos recorded and then they wouldn't be with us anymore. And they'd we need to get someone new in to come and re-record everything. So having something like Murph AI and even the inbuilt stuff into Beyond for voice generation has been really, 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 really good for us, just to save us a fair bit of time, other people's time as well, because I very much understand you all are busy. So going, can you free up an hour to come in and record for me, please, is a big ask sort of thing. So being able to kind of shift that weight away and kind of deal with that our side of the woods is always a bonus. Now,
I think when you ask people to record their own voice, people get a bit creeped out by the sound of their own voice, don't they? Like it's a bit weird when you listen back to yourself. So people sort of shy away from that.
Yeah, you always sound different on recording than you do in your own head, and I think that always throws people.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm dreading listening back to this after it's finished.
But I think it's a really valid point, though. People moving on so quickly. I was working with one of the anaesthetic trainees to create an instructional video. She didn't want to have her voice on it, so I said, "Okay, well, if you write the script, I'll record it." And then, like you say, you want to change it. The next time you record it, if the environment isn't exactly the same, you can tell that there's a change in the recording quality. And yeah, it's really difficult to get that consistency, isn't it? So you don't have any of those problems with something like Murph AI.
Yeah, it takes a lot of kind of almost the environmental impact out of it, sort of thing. So everything that's happening around you is no longer an issue. Sort of echoes in a room or people walking past the door and things like that, as I'm sure you've experienced in recording the podcasts.
It's pretty good quality from what compared to. I mean, there were some videos the department made a few years ago around diabetes care, but it's definitely moved on since then, in my view.
Yeah, especially some of the if you get the premium accounts and stuff like that, some more of their premium voices, there's always a tinge of roboticness, always, and I don't know how quickly that'll go away, because I think there's a lot to the actual human voice that kind of makes you human, and I don't think a machine can quite imitate that just yet, outside of just recording it. And I think that's some of the downfalls of Murph. So there are certain words that it just cannot pronounce, regardless of how you go through it and change. I've been through kind of spelling words in completely abstract ways to try and get it to say what I want it to say. And also when it's coupled up, so like certain sentence structures, or if a word follows another word, sometimes it struggles to differentiate as it goes through. So you always have a creative sort of way of trying to kind of break words up or spell them in certain ways so the AI will read it in a specific way as well. So, I mean, it's been fun because obviously it's always nice to learn new things and how they work and tinker and things like that. It's one of those, it's a small thing to try and fix with the benefits far outweigh the cons, because it's easy enough to restructure a script or change a word than it is to get someone to record for half an hour. So it falls back to that kind of, it's so much quicker to do.
Yeah.
What would have been an hour recording, 3 hours writing a script, you can push the script out of ChatGPT, tweak that within an hour, and then have that as audio within 10, 15 minutes. So yeah, it definitely speeds up the process of producing content.
It's so interesting. I think that kind of captures the pros and cons of AI in general. Like the massive pro being we've mentioned it a couple of times, reducing the tedium and the schlep of having to go through stuff. But then the product is, as you said, it's a slightly robotic voice. And to what extent does that limit engagement? The ones that I've heard, as you said, you kind of immediately know that it's not human, and how much of the human voice is in the little intonations and the little cadence and rhythm and tone, and what impact would that have on someone trying to learn from a video? Are they going to be focusing on the content, or are they going to think, oh, this is a robot? It's so interesting, and I think that's reflected in lots of the other things that we'll talk about.
And I think that's something that's probably worth exploring. Maybe we'll look at creating a video with a human voice and the AI equivalent, and then see what responses we get from people. Because it is quite nerving listening to a robot tell you about stuff sometimes.
I've heard it with the pathology videos, I think, and yeah, there's something about a robot voice whilst an organ is being sliced up that is slightly disconcerting. But it's the future.
Have you tried 11 Labs to recreate a human voice then?
Not yet. I think there's something that scared me about uploading my own voice into something and having it recreate my voice is terrifying.
Yeah, that's what's put me off as well. But some of the results I've seen are, like you said, they're quite scary. Just saw a video the other day from MKBHD, and actually Apple are going to allow you to do that on your iPhone. So I think it was like 30 phrases that you have to say, and then after that, your iPhone will then be able to say anything that you type into the iPhone in your own voice.
We could do this podcast in a year's time, and I won't invite any of you. I'll just give you scripts.
You can just have self-sustaining podcast forever.
GPT to make the script, and then
yeah. Oh, that's good. I think Kash, you were saying that the majority of your AI use has really been the kind of language models, I guess. I think you said the benefits, it really does cut down on your time. Any sort of key things that educators should be aware of?
So I think the main thing is it's the as we were chatting earlier, you said garbage in, garbage out, and that's I probably wouldn't classify it as garbage, but when the output that you get from these large language models, the data set that they're using has not been fine-tuned to the usage that we're talking about today. So essentially, you do have to know the base material that you're using and be able to pick up on this is clearly wrong, and whether it's a small thing like the pKa value or something like that. So I would highly caution against using it when you're talking about a topic that you're not an expert in. But for topics that you are, speeds up the workflow by a factor of 2 to 3 in my personal use. And the other thing is these models are constantly changing week by week to month, depending on what OpenAI or what Google or Microsoft decide to do in terms of their censorship or what output they allow with their models. So, something you might have got a good answer out of ChatGPT a couple of months ago. You put that exact same question in today, and it might be completely different. I think there was a study done by Stanford that looked at the output from ChatGPT, and they've noticed that some of the questions that they were feeding it 3 months ago, it was about 95% accurate. It has dropped down to about 20% because of the censorship of ChatGPT. So I think these are, it's a brave new world, but I think these things are constantly evolving so much that you can't take it for granted that the output that you got before is going to be the same level of quality that further down the line, basically.
No, that's an interesting point. So the same question gave different answers in different time periods. So I hadn't really thought of that.
I think there's been cases as well where like ChatGPT is actually generating content to kind of meet your needs rather than finding actual content as well. It's actually just making it up.
I think that's the problem with all the large language models. They, I think the IT guys say the word hallucinate, and they do hallucinate. They don't say I don't know. They just without going too much into how they work, they will just pick a best guess, essentially, is how they're trained. So you do have to be worrying about what they hallucinate, and especially in the medical field, that has more of a consequence than in others.
Okay, well, Hussein, you sort of went into the literature a little bit, and you found a fairly good article sort of talking about some of the pitfalls or actually sort of wider issues around that. Is there any sort of key points you wanted to pull out of that?
I think it's the breadth, really, and we've touched on quite a lot of it already. AI just has seemingly unlimited potential, and it's how do you harness that in a way that's meaningful? For example, from broad overarching umbrella concepts of curriculum development, we could use AI to just do a needs assessment and see what is it out there that we're not fulfilling in a curriculum, what needs to be touched on. Teaching methodologies like we've talked about, the pragmatic, how do you use these functions in a meaningful way, and the challenges associated with that. A big thing, I think, is assessment and evaluation. So, for example, in medical education, we don't do so much of the essays and feedback, but for example, application to medical school, I think quite a lot of the established literature is showing that sentiment analysis on personal statements and applications is cutting out a lot of resources. And providing feedback over a long period of time, so identifying specific learning needs of students at any stage is a particular advantage. But then there's all kinds of disadvantages. We've touched on the lack of consistency. So asking the same thing multiple times, you'll get different answers. There's algorithmic bias. So the fact that although it's a huge pool of resources that it's based upon, the ability of AI to synthesize and create knowledge based upon a finite pool is limited, and that's a pretty human skill. And then there's the ethics, which again we've touched on. It's the same as that Black Mirror episode. I don't want my voice to be used on a voiceover, let alone someone else somewhere else in the world using it. There's copyright issues. So if you're generating things based upon something else legally, that's a pretty muddy area. And equity of access. So again, we're talking about it in a resource-rich environment where we all have access to these things at the touch of a button. But is the use of AI going to drive the inequities? And in medical education, that's particularly important. Actually, I think from the other direction as well, sometimes we dismiss things because actually we are in a resource-rich area. Actually, this algorithm doesn't suit me because I've got X, Y, Z resources to do it. But perhaps in resource-poor countries, then these AI algorithms could be hugely more beneficial than we perceive them to be here. The other important thing, I think, with any technological advancement is how to approach it. And that's nothing new. So we can, I'm sure, put a link to this framework in the show notes. But there's established approaches to the incorporation of technology into education. So the PICRAT model is a pretty well validated one. So the teacher's interaction with the technology, is it being used to replace something, to amplify something, or to transform something, an educational event? And then the student's relationship to the technology. Are they just passively interacting with it? Are they just passively consuming it? Are they interacting with it in some way, or are they using it themselves to create knowledge? So I think falling back on theory is always a good thing, rather than just letting it run away with you. And this is cynically, anytime something novel comes along, the literature explodes because it's new. and then you kind of get a false sense of, oh wow, this must be something massive, when in fact it's sort of the tail that wags the dog.
I think you hit it on the head there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the next few years, all medical education conferences, well, probably all conferences, I would have thought, will have a decent chunk of AI literature or presentations up there. I mean, we're going to one in August, to the European AMI conference, and I suspect a lot of the workshops, a lot of the seminars will be, this is what we've done, this is how we've experimented using it. And it's a great place to pick up some ideas, but like you say, is it a tool looking for a problem? You know, I think it's really important, just like with any new tech or new approach, is it grounded in good theory when it comes to, you know, effective learning? I had a bit of a play with one of them that created some slides earlier on. I just used an anaesthetic CPD article, and it created visuals to go with the text. And it's actually it was really entertaining just to see the mismatch. And that dissonance, it's so extreme, you could probably appreciate it. But if, as an educator, you don't appreciate that, you could really be interfering with any learning material you're hoping to put out there, in that it's so in conflict that it actually becomes a distraction in itself. So yeah, having an awareness of some of the theory behind it's vital, I would have thought. We're sort of coming towards the end. Max, sorry, did you want to?
I was going to say, like, just along that line of kind of turning content into different formats. Obviously, knowing your source data and stuff like that, and going through and checking is really important. But also, kind of, it can open up your accessibility. So obviously different students have different ways they learn. So being able to use AI to kind of turn like a paper into different forms of accessible content, from a PowerPoint to an audio book to a video, and take some of that kind of, again, to that work. If doing it yourself would take weeks, and if you can generate something like that over a few days with checking and stuff like that, again, like you said, there's issues, but going forward, it might be a really good way to turn one bit of media into multiple formats to make it more accessible for people as well.
I think it's just still very early days, and compared to the start of the year to what we have now, there's so much that's changed. There's so many, literally every week there's someone coming out with a new AI tool, and it's worth people having an awareness and even just experimenting. I would highly recommend people just experiment, but you do need to know what you're on about when you're using these things.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good take-home point. Don't use it to teach something you don't already know about. And if you're trying to learn about a new subject, it's probably not the place to start. If you want to, like you say, write questions based on some article or some text, that's quite useful. Summarizing texts, although again, that could be potentially fraught. Maybe first drafts of things like a PBL or a scenario or a simulation, that might be something that educators could find useful. So for me, those are the kind of things that maybe at the moment we could be using that for. It's obviously a huge area and it's going to change very rapidly. Any sort of take-home points from Max, Hussein?
I think, yeah, if you're going to use it as kind of your foundation and then build upon top of it. It's not like it's done, cool, AI's made this for me. It's use it as your foundation, go through it, tweak it, and make it work for you.
My take-home message is that it seems it's replaced your parental responsibilities.
Story writing, yeah. You're right.
Compared to Andy, I did the same thing with my son. I put his name in. I was like, oh, he loves the Junior Donaldson book. So I said, oh, this is my son's name. Write a short story in the format of a Junior Donaldson book. And, he also really liked it. I don't know if there's a copyright issue that I've submitted to.
Well, on that note, we'll bring it to an end.
Well, we ran out of time and got cut off our Zoom call there, but we hope you found the episode interesting and perhaps we've tempted you to explore some of the AI tools out there. Lots of links in the show notes to start you off, so do please take a look. Thanks from Max, Hussein, Kash and myself for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Faculty Focus podcast. If you like the episode, please share with friends and colleagues. You can also like and subscribe to the show, and perhaps even leave us a review. Clinical education can be tough, but we are stronger as a community, so if you have an idea for an episode or would like to come and talk to us, do get in touch via email or Twitter. Details in the show notes. The Faculty Focus Podcast. Community Development Showcase.